The University of Minnesota Board of Regents meeting on Friday, October 14th will please come to order. And the first item on our agenda is the introduction of the Dean of the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And so we will meet at the podium, President.
In recognition of the Provost's hard work in bringing this search to fruition, I would like to ask Tom Sullivan to have the honor of introducing the new Dean of the Humphrey School.
Good morning, members of the board, Chair Cohen, President Kaler. It's my great privilege this morning to introduce and welcome to our University of Minnesota community Dean Eric Schwartz. Eric, does that sound pretty good? Dean Eric Schwartz. He started this week as the new dean in the Humphrey School. He comes to us from 25 years of the highest level distinguished service in Washington, D.C., most recently Assistant Secretary of State for Population, Refugee, and Migration. Also high positions in the Clinton administration before that. As I mentioned, 25 years in international human rights, posted here and in Geneva and elsewhere in the world. He has a wonderful blend of the highest public service as well as intellectual and scholarly achievements. From time to time, when he's taken a respite from the high government post, he has taught at the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton University, from where he has a master's degree. He is a published scholar, has frequently lectured all over the world on international human rights and humanitarian and refugee questions. He is the preeminent spokesperson in our country on these issues of international human rights. And so it's a great honor for the university to welcome him as our new dean of the Humphrey School. I guess I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that he holds a law degree from New York University. It's nice to have another lawyer in the administration. If you'll please join me in a warm Minnesota welcome to our new Dean of the Humphrey Institute, Dean Eric Schwartz.
What an honor to be asked to take on this important responsibility. To continue to validate the notion of the critical importance of public institutions like the Humphrey School if we're going to meet the challenges of the 21st century. I want to express my deep gratitude and appreciation to the University of Minnesota community, to the Provost, Tom Sullivan, to the new President, Eric Kaler, for entrusting me with sustaining and strengthening the legacy most recently built upon by my friend and former colleague, Brian Atwood. Let me just say very briefly, in preparing for this challenge, I discovered that the federal government is full of Minnesotans in very high positions of importance. I think it's a reflection of the commitment of this state to the ideal of public service. And so I very much look forward to this challenge. I very much look forward to working with the new president, Eric Kaler, in sustaining and strengthening this institution in the months and the years to come. So many thanks.
Oh, we must have photographs, yeah.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion, corrections for the minutes? If not, all those in favor of approving, please say aye. Aye. No. The minutes are approved. We all now look forward to President Kaler and his report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this opportunity to update you on what has been another exhilarating month of my life at this great university. With the inauguration and the passage of my first 100 days, we have, I believe, already accomplished a great deal, even as our agenda remains profoundly full. Before a review of recent developments, let me first say thank you for helping to make my inauguration memorable and meaningful for my family and for me. Your participation, your kind words, and your support meant a lot to us. You'll be pleased to know that the celebration of our university reached thousands of people through just about every possible platform, from a series of campus crawls to a collection of community events. They brought us in touch with every college on campus, our colleagues from the coordinate campuses, students, faculty, staff, and the agricultural, arts, business, and high-tech communities. At the inauguration itself, we had 65 delegates from other institutions and representatives from 7 foreign governments. It was the most watched live streaming event ever on our website, with over 2,600 viewers from across the U.S. and 8 other countries. Since then, another 800 people have viewed the ceremony and inaugural speech online. I was particularly excited by a series of student-focused events, especially the 1,000 students who greeted my family and I on the Washington Avenue Bridge after the official inaugural, and the more than 550 who gathered for the unveiling of my portrait at Kaufman Union the next day. All in all, a pretty humbling experience. We had student social media ambassadors who accumulated more than 1,000 followers on Twitter, and with 140 characters of my own, I tweeted a thank you to all of them and all of their followers. But today, in the good old-fashioned way, let me say simply thank you to everyone in the university community for a very memorable event. I particularly want to recognize the staff in university relations, university services, and campus programs who went above and beyond to organize these series of events. And thanks to their efficient operations and stewardship, the process came in under over $20,000 under budget, and that budget was totally funded with private contributions, for which I'm grateful. Karen and I were extremely touched and grateful for such a warm and memorable week. Let me now turn to a very exciting appointment this week, which is that of Dr. Karen Hansen as our new Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs. First, many thanks to the Search Committee and its Chair, Vice President for Research, Tim Mulcahy, for an outstanding job. As you know, like me, Karen is a U alum, and that's an important element to me. With Dr. Hansen as provost, we get a spectacular combination of a leader with a strong academic record and someone who has honed her skills as a seasoned administrator. She comes from another Big Ten university, another AAU institution, and another land-grant university. She knows the ropes. Plus, Provost Hansen comes here with an academic background in philosophy and the humanities, which nicely complements my background in science and engineering. I'm absolutely thrilled to have Karen as a colleague and our academic leader, and I eagerly await her arrival in February. Tom Sullivan has graciously agreed to extend his term as provost for an additional month during this transition. We will have many opportunities in the coming months to celebrate Tom's service to the university, but I will begin by once again thanking him for his gracious help during this period of transition and his unswerving loyalty to the University of Minnesota. Thank you, Tom. Let me turn now to update you on a few key activities since we last met. I was in Rochester last week meeting with leaders of our University of Minnesota campus there. I've now visited 3 of our 4 statewide campuses, with a Duluth visit in 2 weeks. As part of my visit last week, the university, the Mayo Clinic, and the Hormel Institute refreshed and enhanced our important partnership with documents that were previously approved by this board. This relationship strengthens our partnership, but the partnership between the university and Mayo, the state's 2 research and clinical care leaders. I have convened and am regularly meeting with an operational excellence working group made up of some of our most senior leaders, and we're moving ahead and analyzing all that we do to identify areas for cost reduction and operational improvement. I continue to engage with small groups of faculty members over lunch, and I've begun regular visits to departments across the Twin Cities campus. I regularly interact with alumni and recently met with the Student Senate. We've continued to actively communicate the power and stories of the university with a well-received op-ed in the Star Tribune and a strong and supportive editorial in the Rochester Post-Bulletin in just the past 2 weeks. Our position as the state's only research institution is coming into clearer focus among thought leaders as I meet with them, and they range from the Minneapolis Chamber of Commerce last month to the governor's job summit coming up. And at that summit, I've been asked to speak about the U's critical role in job creation and workforce preparation. And I will emphasize there, too, as I always do, how much this university drives innovation and discovery. Speaking of which, let me talk a little bit about Driven to Discover, our brand, and its associated annual advertising campaigns. To this point, they have focused on the power of research and have changed and improved public perceptions of this university. As a result of the Driven to Discover campaign, annual statewide opinion research shows increases in public perceptions and message awareness about the university. I'm reminded of the adage that one needs to advertise, and if you don't advertise, you might not run out of what you're trying to sell. We are in a very competitive market in higher education, and our ability to be in the public eye is very important. And this weekend, we'll launch this year's campaign with 2 television ads and an integrated online campaign. In fact, the debut will occur Sunday night during the Vikings-Bears football game, but I thought you might enjoy a sneak preview. Past Driven to Discover campaigns have focused on building public understanding of our role as the state's only research university, and this year we're going to take the campaign in a new direction and focus on student experience and the doors and opportunities for discovery this university opens. So let's take a look at our 2 new 30-second spots.
It's your first day at the University of Minnesota. And then you discover what moves you. And then you discover your passion can become your profession. And then you discover the curtain has nowhere to go but up. It's your first day at the University of Minnesota. And then you discover something small. And that small thing has big implications. And then you discover your purpose. And then you discover that it only gets sweeter from here.
Great, thank you. I like those 2 pieces a lot. We've debated in the office as to whether I should say that the second one will create a real buzz in the room, and it was a close vote, but I did. I would like you to meet Ricardo Vasquez, a recent Bachelor of Fine Arts graduate and a Twin Cities actor who was in the second piece. Please, Ricardo, where are you? And of course, Marla Spivak, our distinguished McKnight University professor who's developing practical applications to protect honeybee populations. There are many people on campus who believe they are geniuses, but Professor Spivak is officially a genius, having won a MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant in 2010. Marla, please, thank you for being with us. This week, we also celebrated 2 former university faculty members, Thomas Sargent and Christopher Sims, who were awarded the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. The work for which they received that prize was done at the University of Minnesota. They were here for 18 and 20 years, respectively, before moving to Yale and Stanford. We're very excited for our former colleagues as they carried on our economics program's legacy of teaching and research. Professor Sargent remains a member of our Heller Hurwitz Economic Institute board, and they join a long line of Minnesota-linked Nobel laureates. Finally, sadly, let me say a few words about Professor Judith Martin. Judith's death on October 3rd especially touched many on the university campus and in the entire Twin Cities community. She was a scholar, teacher, governance leader, and civic activist. She was, in fact, a member of the Provost Search Committee. I'm sure many of you met her or worked with her over the years, and we all know that she was too young to have left us. We send our thoughts to her family and friends and all of her colleagues locally and nationally. With that, Madam Chair, I thank you for all the work you and others on this board and the Board of Regents staff do to make this a great university, and I thank you for your support. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, President Kaler. And I hesitate to say this too, but it sounds as though President Kaler has been busy as a bee these past 100 days or more, and really putting his heart and soul into the University of Minnesota. I want to also note the inauguration event of President Kaler on September 22nd, which was a marvelous event, and at that where President Kaler highlighted his themes of excellence, access, efficiency, and philanthropy. And now, members of the board, you are each getting a button that says, "I met Dr. K," and I believe these buttons were passed out when Eric Kaler and his family walked across the Washington Avenue Bridge. So we can all wear these around. I'll put mine on in a little bit. I also want to mention that some of us participated in the ceremonial groundbreaking for the Physics and Nanotechnology Building, a project that received strong bipartisan support in the legislature. Regents Allen, Beeson, Johnson, and I were there to take part in this ceremony. Regents Simmons and Swigum recently joined President Kaler for his community visit to Rochester, and Regent McMillan will be joining the President on his visit to Duluth later this month. I wanted to also mention that my daughter instead of going abroad for her junior year, she was not a student at the University of Minnesota, came to the University of Minnesota for her junior year. And she encountered both of the professors who just have recently won the Nobel Prize in economics. She was an economics major, so that is really special. The board's next regular meeting will be held on December 8th and 9th on the Twin Cities campus. There will be no regular board meeting in November. And that concludes my report. The next item on the agenda is to receive and file reports. However, there are none this month. So we will move on to the consent report. And there are 4 items, and I would entertain a motion to approve the consent report. So moved. And a second? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there some discussion or comment? Regent Simmons.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I'd like to comment on behalf of the University of Minnesota Foundation Trusteeship Committee about the nominations that are coming forward to this board for membership in UMF. And we are very pleased, and I'm very pleased as a regent to see this list come to us. Ken Powell will bring great expertise to the university through his role as a trustee. He has terrific business leadership experience. The Honorable David Larson is fun to bring forward too, because he's a distinguished member currently of the UMF board and of course of this board. And the third member we're bringing forward, Mr. Robert Johnson, has had distinguished service as a UMF trustee and really contributed in the audit function, and he has been a regent appointee as well. So I just wanted to share with you the enthusiasm UMF has for the regents' nominations. If we approve today, then it will come to them.
Thank you, Regent Simmons. Is there any further discussion? Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Regent Cohen. I conclude with Regent Simmons, the appointments. I know these three individuals, one very well, of course, actually a second one very well. Mr. Johnson, we served in the Army Guard together for over 25 years. He was the Judge Advocate General, and very bright, very articulate, smart, and fair. And his father, interesting enough, was an Anoka County attorney for, I'm going to say, probably 30 years prior to his appointment. So there was a Johnson in that seat for over 50 years up at Anoka. So I conclude and fully support these appointments.
Thank you, Regent Johnson. Any further comments? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And any opposed? The motion passed. Yes. The next item on the agenda is the 2012 State Capitol Budget Request. Will Vice Presidents O'Brien and Fitzenreiter please come to the table?
Madam Chair, this item is the approval of the final 2012 capital request, and I have asked Vice President O'Brien to deliver it to you.
Madam Chair, Mr. President, and Regents, obviously I'm Vice President O'Brien. I'm happy to say my colleague is missing his first Regents meeting in 15 years, so duck hunting in North Dakota. Evidently an inordinate amount of water in ducks in North Dakota this year. So we are presenting to you for final approval the 2012 capital request. The capital process is driven by the academic mission of the university. Our facilities exist to support our teaching, research, and service. All of these projects have come through a rigorous process that arrives from academic strategic plans and compacts and our facilities condition assessment that the board is briefed on regularly. The board will recall that this is before you now for the third time. We had a preliminary discussion in July, reviewed in depth the capital request in our September board meeting, and also in our facilities committee and finance committee, and now it's here before you for a final approval. Since you reviewed the request in September, the request has been modified to reflect the decision to postpone consideration of the ambulatory care clinic. This project continues to be a very high priority for the university, and a cross-departmental team is really working on how to restructure the project and bring it forward in the future. The docket materials on pages 12 to 16 give a more in-depth approval or review of the various projects. Our current proposal will have a $90 million request for higher education asset preservation and replacement. The combined heat and power proposal for a renovation of the old main utility building for $81 million. A little over $6 million for the Itasca biological stations and laboratories, $21 million for the Eddy Hall renovation and space optimization project, and $11,025,000 for the American Indian Learning Resource Center on our University of Minnesota Duluth campus. This page shows your financial summary of this, which indicates that the request to the state of Minnesota will be $169,410,000, and the university's share of debt for these projects, $39,705,000. All of these accommodated well within the debt parameters and plans that our Vice Presidents for Finance, Vice President Fitzenreiter, has presented and discussed with you in the past. And with that, Madam Chair, there is a resolution for action before the board, and we're ready to stand for any questions board members might have.
Great. Thank you, Vice President O'Brien. Before we have the discussion, we'll put a motion on the floor, and then we'll have discussion and comments. Thank you, Regent Allen. Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Regent Johnson. It's been moved and seconded that we accept the resolution and this capital report. And now it's open for discussion. Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice President O'Brien, the number 169 million, how does that compare with past biennial requests from the university to the state of Minnesota? Is this higher or lower than in the past?
Madam Chair, Mr. President, Regent Johnson, this is a somewhat modest request compared to our recent years. In recent years, our requests have been generally a little bit more than 200 million.
Madam Chair, if I may, and we've had this discussion many times, but I think it's worth saying as a matter of public record that the 90 million for HEAP is always an important issue. And if we could encourage our elected officials and governor, that is very important. It gives flexibility, if you will, within the university system for repairs and betterments. And sometimes that's an easy target to say, well, we'll reduce that by 30 million and drop down and fund some of the others. And I would hope the board is supportive of the 90 million for all of those improvements that need to be made. And by this document, we are, but to be communicated to respective leadership in the House and Senate that this is an important matter for us.
Thank you for the comment. Regent Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. If there should be a special session for the purpose of bonding in the legislature, would this go forward earlier or would this stay on the regular agenda?
Madam Chair, Mr. President, Regent Simmons, because this is our prioritized A+ list, certainly this would be the source of any request in a special session.
I'm sorry, I didn't speak clearly. If there is a special session, it would go forward at that time, so earlier than,
yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Regent Larson.
Excuse me. Madam Chair, I would just like to reinforce what Regent Johnson just said about HEAPR. Since I've been on the board, which is over 6 years, there have been multiple instances where that was cut. And in my opinion, in most cases, it caused the renovation that was necessary to take some buildings like Northrop, the iconic building of Northrop, and many, many others, and retrofit them at a date later than was in the best interest of the state and of the university, and it actually ended up costing us more. So I just wanted to reinforce what Regent Johnson said. We believe that cutting the
Okay. Regent Swigum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice President O'Brien, I think the amount we have here is a reasonably prudent amount to request from the legislature, and I compliment you on that. I think as I look at the projects, they basically meet our strategic goals. They're the right investments for us to make at this time. I just have a question to follow through, if I could, from the September meeting, and that's in regards to the priorities that we have here. I think the old main facility needs to be done. Okay, I think it's a good investment. If you remember correctly, I had questions of Fitz in September regarding the savings that would come from that energy savings from old main facility. I think it's $7 million approximately if we get the state money, approximately $3 million if we go our own and we don't get our state money. That's ballpark. So my question is this. Considering the priority and considering we should do that, and it's something we'd save money at, maybe we should even use our own money to do it. Did we consider or think about, after my question in September, of lowering the priority of Old Main below Eddy Hall and below the Itasca facilities. You know, if the legislature does go to break down 1, 2, 3, 4, with the possibility of doing it by ourselves if the legislature doesn't give us the whole 169 million, or even going towards Regent Allen and Regent Larson's and Regent Johnson's question of even upping the HEAPR amount, some dollars, which we certainly can use and we certainly need for investment in our facilities, and requesting less in the Old Main facility. Given that we should do it, should we do it on a, should we, I'm questioning the priority.
Madam Chair and President Kaler, Regents and Regent Swigum, I'll take a shot at this, and then perhaps President Kaler would also like to speak to it. To be very direct, no, we have not reprioritized this list. The list, as I mentioned at our last meeting, is really our A+ list, and it's very difficult to prioritize a list that really represents the aspiration of literally dozens of worthy projects and needs for the academic enterprise. As I believe all the regents have experience, some of you more hands-on from your experience dealing with bonding bills, you know that the bonding bill itself and the prioritization of projects is a dynamic experience. And so as we speak with the governor and the staff of management and budget, as we speak with the legislative delegations, which is really just starting to be underway this fall, and as others who have interest in these projects approach the decision makers, there will be a fair consideration of all of these projects. I would say that getting on this short A+ list is a real feather in the cap to any project and really positions them for that funding. I want to speak specifically to the HEAPR issue, and that is that we recognize from our facility condition studies how important our HEAPR funding is and how flexible it is. We've been able to match it with grants to research laboratories, with dollars from academic programs to really leverage those funds and make improvements across the university. What we're striving to do in our presentation of our HEAPR this year is really be presenting that with more concrete stories that really explain to the legislature that this isn't just about repairing roofs and putting in new windows and HVAC systems, but really the impact on the academic enterprise and programs. You know, that's certainly something we'll be able to share with you.
President Kaler, do you have some additional?
Thank you, Chair Cohen and Regent Swigum. I would characterize this request as Plan A. While there are other funding options, they do incur financial stress on the institution. And our decision, I would say my decision, was to present this list in this way. It does represent the needs of the university in priority order. And I do recognize the dynamic nature of discussions around the bonding bill.
Madam Chair, if I could just follow up, and I know strategy setting sometimes is difficult in a public forum. And I recognize that, I respect that. And I think all these projects need to be done. I think 169 million requests is a reasonably prudent amount. I just thought maybe after our discussion of last month, there might have been a reconsideration of the priority, knowing that this Old Main facility needs to be done. We can do it ourselves, we can save money. It's not fair to quote Fitz because he's not here. But I think his words to me afterwards, after the meeting last month, were, yes, Steve, we'd save money if we did it by ourselves, but we can save more money if we use somebody else's dollars. I think is, quote, close enough to, to quote him. I'm just wondering how we can do more. And I don't know if it's a fair question or not. I'll be supportive. I just, strategy setting in public is sometimes tough.
Regent Allen, you're next.
I just wanted to say I concur with the comments that have already been made about how important the HEPRA amount is, and then I wanted to give my annual comment about it. With all apologies to those of you who have heard it year after year, but I see some new faces too. If you take the $90 million that's asked for, 29 million square feet we have, average $100 per square foot for renovation, from everything from chicken coops to high-tech laboratories. That means we'd get around every square foot about every 30 years. And if the legislature does cut that in half, which is what they've traditionally done, then we would only get around to it every 60 years. So I think that translates it into a little more understanding of what that $90 million means. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Allen, for that reminder. Next, Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm reminded of our overarching goal to reduce the footprint of the university by, I think, 5%. So I'm pleased to see that almost 160 or over 160 million of the 169 million is for renovation of space. And at the same time, the staff's decommissioning buildings. So going forward, having this heavier weight on renovation is, I think, consistent with that goal of reducing this footprint, because it is an enormous amount of space, and that coupled with the fact that we are behind schedule on our deferred maintenance. This is you know, that's a significant problem. So I like the way this sets up in terms of the focus on renovation.
Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I appreciated Vice President O'Brien's comment. This is the A-plus list. And with Regent Swigham's question about where we might put something in the list, I guess my question is, I've never looked at this list as meaning the fifth project or the fourth project or the fourth and fifth priorities. And if they are, then I have significant concerns. I share all my colleagues' concerns about the need to invest $90 million across the system, not expand the footprint. But if placement on this list reflects how we're going to push it at the legislature, I have some concerns then. Two of these, I spoke to them last meeting. I have personal knowledge, and I've dug quite deeply into both the utility renovation opportunity and the American Indian Center at Duluth, and I can speak to the importance of both of them. So my understanding, and I don't know that I have a further question for President Kaler or for Vice President O'Brien, is that this isn't a rank-ordered list, that these are all important, and they're the most important priorities out of many, many dozen. So if my understanding's wrong, then I'd appreciate hearing more about that.
Regent McMillan, Chair Cohen, thank you. Indeed, we will push hard for all of these projects. We traditionally do identify HEPR as the top one. There are geographical and programmatic needs for every single one of these, and we will advocate for them vigorously.
Regent, just a minute. We'll take them in order. Regent Broad.
Madam Chair, I just, I think when I look at the reduction in our request, I think it's a practical approach. Obviously, I think that the Academic Health Center is a significant priority, and I'm thankful that it's still on the table for conversation going forward. But I think that this practical approach also recognizes that the U of M had some good success in a previous bonding bill in a non-bonding year. And so we're coming into a bonding year, and I would guess that the desire to have a big, beefy bonding bill, because of the one that they just passed, is going to be lessened. And so I think this shows that the university is not obtuse to that fact. And I also appreciate the recognition that and the clear evidence, I think, in this list, that the U doesn't just put a list out every 6 years. The University of Minnesota doesn't just put our capital bonding list out and then go down the list. What I think this list shows is that we put a request in, and you know what, other priorities crop up, and readjust the list, we reprioritize, and I think that shows a thoughtful approach to our strategy. So I will be supporting this today and look forward to continued conversations on the Academic Health Center.
I have two more comments, and then we will close this discussion unless there's something urgent. Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. Regent Simmons asked a question of Vice President O'Brien, would this potentially be contained in a special session if there were one? And I believe Vice President O'Brien indicated that it would be, or the attempt would be. And I just have one of these voices from the wilderness about this, that I think we need to rethink that this would become part of a special session, if in fact the special session is about what we all know about. I have this feeling that we shouldn't be part of that discussion and wait. Granted, it's good to get the bonding bills done and projects moving, but remember, it takes 2/3 vote of the House and the Senate, and I would not want these projects to get mixed up in another structure.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Vice President O'Brien.
Madam Chair, Mr. President, Regents, Regent Johnson, I was not suggesting that we would advocate for that. I was suggesting that if the university was asked what our priorities were for bonding, that this would be the list no matter what the forum is.
All right. Thanks for the clarification. Regent Sviggum, did you have one more comment, and then we're going to close?
Clarification, not to disagree with my friend and my leader, President Kaler, but I do believe this is a prioritized list, and I believe that's the way we sell it to the legislature. And if I'm wrong, let me know, because I don't think, President Kaler, you have to advocate for every project. We'll advocate for every project there, but this is a prioritized list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that was the direct answer I think that Regent McMillan should have received, and I don't think he received it.
Regent Sviggum, Chair Cohen, I'm sorry if I was not clear. I understood Regent McMillan's comment as one of concern for placement on this list. When we are asked by the state for a priority list, we must give them a priority list. And through the conversations we've had, these represent the system-wide priorities. But because of the geographical diversity and opportunities for conversation around particular projects, we will advocate for all of these aggressively. So this is our A+ list in priority order.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the good discussion and for all the hard work, Vice President O'Brien. We have a motion on the table to accept the resolution and the capital budget request. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The request has been approved. We will move on. Thank you very much again to the University Plan Performance and Accountability Report. Provost Sullivan, please come to the table. And President Kaler, do you have some introductory remarks?
I do not, Chair Cohen. Provost Sullivan is prepared to deliver the summary.
All right. Provost Sullivan.
Chair Cohen, members of the board, President Kaler, good morning again. Before you is a resolution to accept the 2011 University Plan Performance and Accountability Report. In your docket material before you, we have provided a final copy of the report, which has some minor updates and adjustments to the copy that you had before you in September. All of the significant findings that we discussed in your thoughtful and detailed discussion in September remain the same in this report. I hope as you move forward in this new academic year, you have opportunities to refer to this resource and help inform the discussion, as it is, I hope, a thoughtful and an accurate report for the year of the present state of the university as you discuss how to move the university forward. So I would ask for approval of this resolution.
Thank you, Provost Sullivan. And there is a wealth of information in this. I can comment on that. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second? Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Regent Simmons.
Yes, I just like to thank you very much for this report that we will forward to the legislature and remind us that we indeed do report to the legislature on an annual basis our performance. We maintain our accountability, and therefore I don't see a need to continue to add other vehicles to do that.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the accountability report has been approved, and thank you very, very much, Provost Sullivan and all the others on your team who have worked on this. It is, as I say, there is a lot of information, and as Regent Simmons commented, this is very helpful for the legislature.
Thank you.
I think you need to stay just where you are for the next item, which is the report, which I think we're all looking forward to hearing more about. I know one of the committees heard some about it in the Education Planning Committee. But it's a report on the Enrollment Management Committee, and Provost Sullivan, Provost McMaster, and Professor Vanderbush. We're very glad to have all three of you at the table.
Chair Cohen, members of the board, and President Kaler, we're here today to present for background in your discussion the size, scope, and mission report. In May of 2010, I appointed this committee, this very distinguished group of faculty, to help us look carefully at the size and scope in the context of the university's mission, specifically with regard to undergraduate education, historically, where we are today, and where the university ought to put its priorities moving forward. And second, with regard to graduate education that is so important to the research mission of this university. As you'll hear in a few minutes, as we discuss the graduate education priorities of the university, these are inexorably linked to the research, the important research statutory mission of this university. And the report here, you'll see, is one that is rich in history. How did we get to the place we are today? And I hope is thoughtful about the recommendations to the administration and the board as to where we should go to strengthen and make sure that we are advancing at each step of the opportunity towards excellence and financial access for our undergraduate program, as well as a first rate in all respects, our PhD and graduate program. So you'll see the report and the presentation today will be in two parts. Vice Provost Bob McMaster will share the findings and recommendations with regard to the undergraduate program. Professor Kate Vandenbosch, who is here, former chair of the FCC, one of our very distinguished department chairs, in this case plant biology, is here to give the recommendations and the rationale for those recommendations with regard to graduate education. The specific goal in the report, as presented by both of my colleagues here, is how do we go forward to enhance excellence at the university and on the undergraduate level to ensure affordability and to make sure, as President Kaler has said often and well, to make sure that our graduate programs are of the first rank and that we have a careful review process to measure and make sure that those programs continue to enhance in quality towards our goal of excellence. So with that introduction, I would ask Vice Provost McMaster to begin his comments regarding undergraduate education.
Great. Chair Cohen, President Kaler, members of the committee. What we'd like to do today is to go through this report and hit some of the highlights of the overall document that you have been given access to. We won't be able to hit all the points in the report, but we hope we hit the major ones that you need to consider. One of the things we'd like to do is to discuss briefly the sort of history of the project. This committee was charged in May 2010 by Provost Sullivan. We met regularly throughout the entire academic year. We broke into subcommittees, undergraduate, professional, and graduate, to try to divide and conquer the work throughout the year. We conducted interviews. This was a critical part of the project with all of the collegiate deans. We met with other key units on campus to seek their counsel on what the impact of increased or decreased enrollments would be on their particular portfolios. And then, of course, we gathered lots of data sets. I want to mention from the beginning that and I mentioned this yesterday, we really view this as a work in progress. This is a document, this is a project that should be revisited on a regular basis. One really can't lock in a whole set of enrollment management strategies at one point. We need to look at this in 2 years and 5 years as well. So getting going on some of the data then, you can see that these are some of the trends, enrollment trends over the last decade. We see that at the undergraduate level, we've been trending upwards. That has to do because of the increased enrollments in certain colleges. You'll remember that we have 7 freshmen admitting colleges on campus, as well as better retention. And so you can see the effect of better retention in that curve as well. These are obviously Twin Cities data. One can see at the graduate and professional level a trending up over the first part of the decade and a slight trending downward. And Professor Vanden Bosch will talk more about this due to several reasons. And then we can see a trending down of non-degree enrollments, and we really have de-emphasized that at the university, particularly at the undergraduate level, and emphasize full-time students. We started our work by establishing a set of principles. I won't go into the weeds on these principles. We have a set of principles for all students. We have a set of principles for undergraduates, for graduates, and professional students. I will mention just a few of these kind of moving forward. One is to maintain affordability. We want to make sure that any capable student who is admissible to the university can get into this university and has fiscal access. We want to admit for success. We want to make sure that the students we admit to this university can graduate in 4 years in a timely way and succeed. We want to support student success. We want to make sure we have the infrastructure in place, the fiscal infrastructure, the advising infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, so that our students have a terrific experience here. And of course, we want to incorporate all aspects of diversity into the admission and the student success process. One other principle that I'll mention involves transfer students, because we are looking more carefully at transfer students, and we feel that this is a place that the university should spend more energy. We should have perhaps a better linkage with MNSCU and other systems, and I'll talk about that later as well. So again, a set of graduate principles and then professional principles in the document that I would encourage you to take a look at. They really drove our work. Throughout the year, we would regularly go back to those principles to recalibrate our discussions. So if we get into the undergraduate recommendations then, that I'll try to go through relatively quickly. There were 14 of these, 14 recommendations. And I promise I'm not going through all 14 today. If I did, we'd be here a long time and I'd lose my job. So what I'd like to do is hit on 4 or 5 of these that we think are most critical. One is to moderately increase undergraduate enrollments at the university. Some of the graphs here show you recent trends in undergraduate enrollments. This shows you, this particular graph, the year by year, the number of freshmen that matriculate, the number of transfers that matriculate, and then the red curve at the top is the cumulative number. One of the things that I emphasize here is the relative stability of the freshman class, what we call NHS, new high school students, and the relative instability of the transfer class, where you get a lot more variation year by year. And that's something we'd like to address and start to stabilize the number of transfer students. But if you start to disaggregate these data a bit, you can see that each one of our colleges, in fact, has a unique enrollment signature. So this is the enrollment signature for CLA, where one can again see the relative stability with freshmen, but you can see the significant variation with transfer students, where it varied from 811 up to 1,496. This is the signature for CSE, which has been trending upward, science and engineering. And this is the signature for CBS, which is trending upwards with high school students, new high school students. and trending downwards a bit with transfers. Those are NAS, New Advanced Standing. So the point here is that we have really 7 different pictures that we need to look at. The committee spent a significant amount of time considering the different enrollment scenarios, and there were 4 of these that were discussed throughout the year. One was no growth. That is, we have it right, we're going to leave it alone. Scenario 2 was a modest growth in STEM areas with offsetting reductions in other areas. That is, if we bring in 300 more STEM students a year, we have to take 300 more students away from the other colleges. The scenario we selected, in fact, was number 3, which was modest growth in the STEM areas and no changes in other areas. That is, there are no plans to decrease the enrollments in CLA or the College of Design or CFANS. We will leave those alone. This would put our overall enrollment, when you account for retention, up around 32 to 33,000 students. This year we have 30,619 students on campus, so that's the position we're at right now. Now, why didn't we consider, I'm sorry, I didn't mention scenario 4, why didn't we consider more carefully scenario 4, which is significant overall growth, perhaps raising undergraduate enrollments to 34 or 35,000? There are several reasons. This perhaps is one of the most important. This graph shows you declining high school enrollments or declining high school graduations over the next 8 years or so, or next 5 years now, and you can see that in the upper Middle West we have a serious problem. Nearly all of the states have downward trends, some have significant downward trends. That is, we're facing a bit of a shortfall in high school graduates. More importantly, perhaps, we already have a relatively high percentage of market share that come to the University of Minnesota. System-wide, we matriculate approximately 9.5% of the high school graduating class from Minnesota, those 64,400 students that came out last year. We matriculate on this campus 3,600 of those, and that's 5.6%. If you compare that number with our peers, you can see we're very high. So we're already capturing a relatively large number of the students who are coming out of Minnesota high schools. So if we sort of play this out, this scenario of significant growth, and again, we spent a lot of time noodling on this, we think it would result in lower academic preparation because we're not going to have the pool to continue to increase the metrics that we have been and also increase the number of students. We're going to have more students on campus, leading to larger class sizes, and there'd be other effects, a lower quality student experience, reduced retention and graduation rates, decreased interest from other high ability students who would want to come here, and we're basically arguing that this would lead us into a bit of a spiral. So we're not recommending that scenario. We also have to consider, if you're looking at enrollment increases in any of the colleges, the fiscal impact, the financial considerations. And we have 2 categories here, new revenues and new costs. Some of the new revenues that colleges would need to consider in increasing enrollments are the proportion of in-state, out-of-state students, the enrollment patterns that would result from increased students, projected student retention, collegiate fees. If you look at the new costs, these are pretty obvious: financial aid, new faculty, lab facilities, student services. The point here is that if we're going to increase the enrollment in any college, there has to be the commensurate student support, faculty, curriculum put in place so that the students still have a great experience. In fact, in the report, there are 2 very detailed fiscal plans for science and engineering and for the College of Biological Sciences. So if we look at the increased STEM enrollment recommendation, we know we have this huge demand for students who want to get into, in particular, our 2 STEM colleges, primary STEM colleges of CSC and CBS. You can see some of the growth statistics here in terms of the number of applications. We also know that there's increased interest in pursuing STEM careers based on the ACT test that's taken and preference on the ACT test. So if we look at the applications to CSE and CBS, you can see that collectively the number of applications has gone up from about 5,000 to 13,500. Tremendous growth. You also need to consider with that growth that these are excellent students. These are many of them very high ability students who are applying to these two colleges. Talking about the ACT, these are the prospective majors identified by ACT takers, both in 2005 and 2010. And again, you can see that one of the areas that has the most significant growth is in engineering, math, and science that goes up about 5 points over that 5-year period. So we have student demand, we have student quality, we have student interest. It all adds up to trying to increase the number of STEM students in addition to the societal needs and the job market, which predicts that's going to be one of the largest growth areas for new positions. In fact, I just got back a few days ago from a conference at Purdue on STEM, undergraduate STEM education, and the major focus was on how universities can increase the number of STEM graduates to fulfill societal needs. The plans here, which are documented and detailed in the report, include each year adding 100 more students to 3 colleges, to the College of Science and Engineering. That would bring them from 900 to 1,000 over a period of 4 or 5 years. College of Biological Sciences and the School of Nursing, which we would plan to make freshmen admitting. And again, the full documentation is in the report. We also want to make sure we pay attention to transfers. The recommendation here is to scale back a bit and to create a ratio of 2 to 1 freshmen to transfers that matriculate each year. We're starting to look at the whole transfer experience. We're looking at admissions and orientation and the curriculum, the engagement on campus, the advising, and we think that perhaps we could improve the student experience by decreasing the number of transfers just a bit. This particular chart that you have, again, shows the variation in the admission of transfers that has gone from 31% to 41%. 41% is a very high number of transfers to bring in compared to freshmen. We provide some data as to where these students are coming from, mostly from the state of Minnesota and, of course, Wisconsin, the Dakotas, other states. And in particular, we provide you with a listing of the specific institutions students are transferring from, and 6 of the top 7 are community colleges. This chart shows you where we sit vis-a-vis our peers in terms of overall enrollments, and this is one interesting point about this slide is that, in fact, we're not at the top in terms of overall enrollments. Okay, we often think of ourselves as huge in terms of undergraduate students. We're really in the middle of the pack. But the important part of this slide is that middle bar, the yellow bar that is in the middle with Minnesota, and that is 32% in this particular year. And you can see how most of our peers, aside from the UC system, are significantly lower than that 32%. Wisconsin at 17%, Illinois at 15%, Michigan at 13%. So that's not either a positive or a negative, it's an observation that we're large compared to our peers. And we also feel that again, by reducing the number of transfers, by trying to create a 2 to 1 margin or ratio, we're going to be able to give these students a better experience and improve the graduation rates. I should make one comment about UC. The UCLA and UC Berkeley situation are because of a structural plan within the state of California that feeds community college students into the UC system, and so they have a plan to take more transfers in the whole UC institutional system. One of the other things we'd like to do is to improve the graduation rates and retention rates with transfer students. This particular graph shows you the graduation rates for NAS transfers through time. And again, you can see that most transfers, in fact, don't graduate after 2 years. They come in with about 60 credits, but the modal number of years is 3 and 4 for students to get out. We want to continue to improve the academic profile of the classes. We've made tremendous progress here over the last 10 years. We want to continue to shift this upwards. Our goals here are to bring in a student body with an average ACT of 28. We're at 27.5 now, and also increase the percent of the students in the top 10% of their class. That's a particular vulnerability for us, especially with some of the surveys, including U.S. News and World Report. We, at the same time, want to make sure we're improving the incoming metrics for transfer students. We haven't paid a lot of attention to this, and so there are recommendations for retention rates, graduation rates, and incoming metrics for transfer students. We certainly, as part of this report, address retention and graduation and the need to reach the Board of Regents goals, aspirational goals. We're at the goal right now in terms of retention, and we, of course, are working very hard to reach the goals for 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation rates. A critical part of this document discusses the need to narrow the achievement gap. We have, in fact, increased the number of students of color on our campus in all categories over the last 5 years. That's the good news. We also have managed to significantly improve our first-year retention for students of color. And again, you can see these data where at this moment, and you can see the difference in the last 2 columns here. The difference in first-year retention between students of color and white students is only 1 point now. But that should be 0. And the same with graduation rates for students of color, which are going up. And you can see this with the 4-, 5-, and 6-year rates, or the comparison between whites and students of color. But we need, again, to assume that that achievement gap should be 0 as we move forward. And what do we need to accomplish that? Finally, in terms of the last recommendation I'll discuss, it gets into our Access to Success program. This is a program that started in fall of 2008. We bring in approximately 450 students. They matriculate into 3 different colleges. And whereas it's been going reasonably well, we feel this is a time to step back, look at ATS, and perhaps expand this into a 4-year program instead of a 1-year program, to think about the additional types of student support that will be necessary for this program, and to make it all university, not just 3 colleges. So we have a section in the report that documents that as well. And at this point, I'll shift over to graduate education.
Thank you, Vice Provost McMaster, and I'm pleased to be here. Regent Cohen, President Kaler, and members of the Board of Regents. As Provost Sullivan said at the beginning, some of the principles and some of the strategies actually that we're talking about for graduate and professional enrollment management differ considerably from undergraduates. And the reason, some reasons about the PhD enrollment plan are documented here. I want to mention that we did some overall scoping of trends in different areas of graduate and professional education, but our focus, most of our work has been on PhD programs. So the one major reason that undergraduate and PhD programs differ is that undergraduate enrollment has a big central component for making decisions, whereas for PhD programs, those decisions are made locally within units, within programs, and within colleges. The key reason for this is that PhD programs are very closely tied to the unit's research mission. There's a synergy between graduate education and research. It's our signature research strengths that create opportunities for advanced training and act as talent magnets for great students. And top applicants are particularly attracted to working with individual faculty who are conducting leading research. And the students themselves help to conceive and conduct the research. So a lot of synergy there. Additionally, PhD students contribute to the teaching and training mission of their units. So all of these things are taken into account when deciding on the next year's class. This slide provides some context of where we are with respect to our peers, as well as the next slide. And I think that the take-home message from the two slides is that we're big and getting bigger. We see here two different ways to look at enrollment at the University of Minnesota. The higher bar there on the left reflects all students, including those who are in an inactive status, those that are registered for 0 credits. This is something that started after 9/11, a little bit less than a decade ago. And then the bar, the third one in there, reflects only those full and part-time students that are active. But either way, we can see that with respect to our peers, we're at or very near the top of the range in terms of total graduate and professional enrollment. This shows the general trend and is broken down by a number of different classes of types of students. The major take-home message is that we've seen growth in graduate and professional enrollment over the last decade, with most of that growth occurring in the first half of the decade. Now, I want to mention at the bottom here how we've defined graduate and professional students. For the doctorate level, we're using definitions that are currently in use by the U.S. Department of Education. A research doctorate is considered to be a PhD or an EDD, and we have several categories of professional doctorates, including an MD, DDS, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine, Doctor of Pharmacy, JD, Doctor of Musical Arts, Physical Therapy, Audiology, and Doctor of Nursing Practice. This gives us a bit more detail, and the color coding here indicates the nature of the change. The hot colors are increased enrollment, and the blue colors are decreased enrollment. And I think what I hope you will readily see is that we've seen net increase in professional master's, professional doctorate, research doctorate, while over the same period of time we've seen a net decrease in research master's students. Interestingly, at the beginning of the decade, there were virtually no certificate students, and this is an area that has really taken off to the point that we have nearly 500 certificate students in post-baccalaureate programs at this time. So earlier I said that enrollment management reflected the sum total of, or enrollment in PhD programs reflected the sum total of a lot of local decisions. So how are those local decisions made? Well, in order to get a read on this, the committee interviewed about a couple dozen directors of graduate studies from programs all over the university. And we found that enrollment targets were influenced by quite a few factors. One of them, of course, is the qualifications of the applicant pool. Another is available funding for student support. In many disciplines, in fact, most disciplines, PhD students are supported through the institution, not only for tuition, but also a stipend. And the resources that are used for this are a combination of local resources, for example, teaching assistantships, and external resources from competitive grants, from external fellowships, and the like. So programs typically take into account how much funding they have available to disperse in determining how many students they will admit. Other factors include a view of the overall capacity for training and advising, where there's a very close relationship between students and their committees, and they have a mentor-mentee relationship with their advisor. There's a limit on how many students can be effectively trained. And also the minimum number required for a good experience in peer-to-peer interactions. So in general, especially looking at our top programs, those that have been top performers over a long period of time, we can define what is a best practice: to expect and enable timely degree completion by admitting students for success and not exceeding the capacity of the program. So focusing on the admission for success, this goes back to one of our key guiding principles that we set out at the beginning of our work. So how are we doing in terms of guaranteeing or fostering timely degree completion and overall student progress? There are a couple of metrics here that I'm presenting that give us a read on that, and these are median time to degree and the average completion rate within a defined period of time. And there are two data sets, so you see two tables here. One is a data set that we harvested from the recent ranking by the National Research Council, which was just released this past year and was from data that was compiled in 2006. And this, in this ranking, 69 of our PhD programs were considered. So what we see in this case is that there's a range in median time to degree with an average time of about 6 years, and the average completion rate varies also extensively. The NRC used two different standards, one for humanities and one for all other programs. In humanities, the time to degree tends to be longer. We also pulled our own data for over a period of time for all of our PhD program, and interestingly, we saw pretty similar trends. That is, quite a wide range in median time, time to degree and percent completion rates. So we gave a lot of thought to how can we foster good quality programs and good student outcomes. And so this is our first recommendation, that the institution and the programs that make up the PhD programs of the institution need to set goals for graduate student outcomes and also to track progress for all graduate programs. We're already starting to track graduate programs, and that information has been shared with programs this fall. We want to set program-specific goals for percent retention, percent completion, and median time to degree. So that would be able to take into account discipline-specific differences. And we also recommend using the student outcome data as one approach to evaluate program performance. So I think we can agree that timely progress to degree and high proportions of degree characteristics are desirable, but the committee wants to really stress that these metrics are not sufficient in and of themselves to identify outstanding programs. In other words, you could be great at graduating PhD students, but still have a program that wasn't highly regarded by your peers. So we need to look at additional metrics. So this brings me to a little detour into the consideration of the outcome from the NRC rankings. The National Research Council is an arm of the National Academies of Science and Engineering, but they looked at programs not just in science and engineering, but the breadth of the university. And they used quite a few different criteria. I'll be talking a bit more about those. And they had two different rankings, the R and the S, where there was a different weighting of the criteria to come up with an index. The NRC rankings looked at 6 broad fields. They aggregated programs into 6 broad fields. And the University of Minnesota did best overall in the broad fields of engineering and in agriculture. When we looked at how individual programs were ranked, however, they came from a lot of different areas. So I've listed here about 14 of our indisputably top programs, but I would also emphasize that depending on how you emphasize criteria, this list is longer. We've got another list that's right behind this list. So the good news is we have a good number of top-ranked programs, many in the top single digits. I want to mention that in this effort by the NRC, they only looked at PhD programs and they didn't look at every field. So we can use also the NRC rankings to get a read on how we compare to peer institutions. And we used both the R and the S rankings to do this. And here we see results from the same peer group that we've been using for this study. And we see that we are outranked by many notable institutions. We're probably not where we would like to be. We also looked not just at this group of 10 peers, but at the 35 public AAU institutions, all of them strong research institutions, and that whichever criterion we're looking at, the University of Minnesota comes out in middling territory, I would say. So the good news is we have some really strongly ranked programs, but overall we're in the middle of the pack. So the committee has raised a question for consideration, and that is, are we overextended in our PhD programs for available resources? So the bullets here summarize some of the points I've made so far. We are at or near the top of our peer group in total post-baccalaureate enrollment. Something I didn't detail but is in the report with some more documentation. The University of Minnesota has a large number of graduate programs and PhD programs within that. Compared with peers, we're out on one margin. The NRC rankings indicate that although we have many highly ranked programs, others have lower performance and lower reputation as detailed by the ranking. And also, when we look at PhD student success rates as measured by median time to degree and percent completion rates, we see a high degree of variability among the programs. Okay. So this brings us to our next recommendations, and I've grouped these under a heading of quality-centric enrollment management. In fact, I think we would say we're going beyond enrollment management, but quality-centric program management at the PhD level. The first recommendation detailed here is that the graduate school needs to have a strong role in providing incentives for program improvement and in monitoring and promoting quality overall. Recommendation 3 here indicates a primary mechanism to do that, and that is to provide programs with regular and systematic information concerning program performance that will help lead to high quality. And this process I see as being a joint mission between the Office of Institutional Research and the graduate school. I mentioned that the NRC rankings use quite a few different metrics, and as we looked at those metrics, we looked at how they were related, if they were correlated, and so on. We found that we can't use just one type of metrics to be able to identify quality, because there are many different dimensions to quality. This includes a lot of the metrics that were used by the NRC process, plus some additional metrics and indicators. And we've grouped these into 6 different areas. So the text of the report goes through these in a lot of detail. I want to stress the big picture about these 6 different areas. One type we would call student input metrics. There you can see this as a parallel to some of the types of metrics that we use in undergraduate tracking currently, and they measure different aspects of the training and readiness and ability of incoming graduate students. It also would include some program statistics such as number of applications, the number of acceptances, and the percent yield from the offers that are made. The second metric type would be faculty input metrics. So these are measures of faculty productivity, faculty research quality, and impact, such as the grants they obtain, the publications, how much they're cited, and so on. And what I want to emphasize about these metrics is that most of these have a peer review component to them. When faculty get external grants, they compete, and in some cases, for example at NSF, many programs have only a 10% funding rate. So when people get a grant, and if they get grants repeatedly over years, they have been repeatedly evaluated by their peers and found to be intellectual leaders. So not only does this measure productivity, but it's a measure of the reputation of the faculty in the program. The third one here are national or international reputation measures. We mentioned the NRC ranking, but there are other rankings, and especially within disciplines, that can provide important viewpoints. Moving on to the final 3 types of metrics. One we call program operation at the graduate student level. This is graduate student productivity and impact, with a lot of metrics that are parallel to the faculty metrics. And these are things that the students do while they're here, and how quickly they begin to do them in their program, how quickly they transition to being an independent researcher in their own right. Another is program operation at the program level. This relates to some of the metrics I've already talked about in terms of student success, and also some additional metrics. And lastly, output metrics, what happens to our students after they leave the program. And I think this is probably one of the most important areas to get a read on the quality of a program, but it's also probably the most difficult to measure. We're interested in where our students are placed and whether they're placed, whether they go on to professions, job situations that are influenced by and required by, that require their PhD. Also, what do they end up doing in terms of contributions to their disciplines? And there are increasing number of tools for harvesting this kind of information. Okay. So the next recommendation relates to how we would use that information. So that information would be supplied on a regular basis for programs to track their own progress. But in addition, we have proposed an internal review process that would happen in an iterative fashion. And we have proposed that the review committee would be especially populated by Minnesota faculty who are distinguished scholars and trainers of PhD students, and those with demonstrated leadership in graduate education as directors of graduate studies and in other capacities, knowledgeable staff, and also we propose bringing in some graduate education leaders from peer institutions, perhaps deans of graduate study, from peer institutions that have undertaken this kind of review process. And we've proposed that the output of this committee would be to use all of the assembled metrics from programs to classify programs into 4 different areas: outstanding, those that are truly at the top of their game; strong, programs that have the potential to move into the outstanding category or perhaps increase in size without losing quality; good programs that are doing well and have appropriate plans for the future and are appropriately sized; and another category that we've called needs reassessment that's a little heterogeneous. Now, I'm going to talk about the top and the bottom categories in a minute, but I wanted to come back to a point that Regent Simmons brought up yesterday with a question. She asked, do we have external reviews of graduate programs, and how does that compare to what we're proposing here? We do that. We have external peer review of graduate programs, but we can't do that on a very quick turnaround. That tends to happen in a 7 to 10 year time frame for each program, and it gives peer review and usually developmental information for programs. How do they get better? But it's not a good tool for comparing within the institution. So we're using this in a way to complement that, to do it more frequently and to give different information. So this next recommendation relates to that top tier of programs, outstanding programs. And our goals here are several. The major one is to recognize that it takes a lot of effort over decades to create strengths and to maintain strengths, and to create a reputation, to create those signature strengths of the institution that are so strongly important to our function. So one of our goals here is to prevent the erosion of these signature strengths within the university, and to do this by providing support from additional financial support from the graduate school to the very best programs. This would provide incentives to those programs and to others that would aspire to be within their ranks. And it would also help us to recognize patterns of success and to support those patterns of success. In recognizing patterns of success, what we want to do is to identify best practices for graduate programs across the disciplines and within subsets of disciplines, and thereby instill a culture of excellence that permeates our PhD programs. On the other end, programs that need reassessment would be those that are showing some signs of difficulty to perhaps indicators that they need to be considered for discontinuation. And they may have one or more, or probably more, of the following indicators, including low demand, the inability to attract highly qualified applicants, high dropout rates, excessively long times to degree, low faculty and or student productivity, and low rankings. We expect this to be a small minority of programs. But we recommend that such programs would be placed at a low priority for graduate school funding, and that in a collaborative process between the programs, their colleges, and the graduate school, that goals would be set for how to improve programs, how to restructure them, perhaps by recombining with other programs, or eliminate them and also with a time frame for carrying out these outcomes. As you've seen, we've really focused on the PhD programs, and we didn't have as much time to devote to other areas. And so we've made some recommendations to put on the to-do list. And these are particularly to look at professional master's and professional doctoral programs where we have seen an overall growth. We think it's important to put in place processes to evaluate these programs as well. It's possible that some of the metrics that we've identified for PhD programs might also be applicable here. Probably a lot of the metrics that we've defined are not applicable, and there may be other metrics or indicators that would be useful here. And similarly, we recommend developing processes for evaluating the quality and performance of the post-baccalaureate certificate programs. So that is the end of my formal comments, and I think both Vice Provost McMaster and I are ready to entertain your questions.
Thank you very, very much, Vice Provost McMaster and Professor Vanden Bosch, for a very interesting, provocative, I'm sure, report. So I will now have questions and comments. Regent Allen.
Thank you so very much. One of my frustrations on being on the board here is coming from an administrative position in a small liberal arts college where you were in the middle of this kind of research, to coming to a policy role in a huge research university. In knowing that the research was there but not seeing it, it's been a frustration. I think you've given us a tremendous picture today of the work you do to analyze what we're all about, what our strengths and weaknesses are, and where we need to go. And I just want to say a very large thank you for that. This is probably one of the top 2 or 3 reports I've seen in the time we've been here.
Thank you.
Regent Simmons.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Cohen. I know that Regent Ramirez will comment on behalf of the committee where we had such a good presentation and discussion yesterday, but I'd like to comment as a regent. First, I want to commend the provost for this undertaking. It's huge and it's frankly bold, and I really think this will improve this university terrifically. You put together quite a team, and they've engaged so thoroughly and well, so thank you and congratulations. Second point I want to make is I think the principles you developed and used to guide your work are so good and gives me great comfort with where you've come with your data and with your recommendations, because they're good principles. The third point I'll make is that looking at the specific recommendations, they're very exciting. With respect to the undergraduate recommendations, the modest increase in STEM student numbers, a focus and increased attention and focused on the transfer students, and looking at the distribution of our student body in terms of their origin geographically, I think are strong, good recommendations. With respect to the graduate student population recommendations, first of all, you're creating and implementing, I believe, really data-driven processes that, if we can implement the things that you've recommended, will improve the quality of our offerings. I think they will change the look of the graduate school in terms of numbers of programs, numbers of the way that students are distributed, probably numbers of students. I also think they have high potential to improve the outcomes. And to the final point you made, I would say that we must know if they improve the outcomes. And your focus on getting outcome data, what happens to these students, is critical to our decision making. It's hard, and most places don't do that very well, so I'm just excited that you're ready to undertake that. And I'm thinking this sounds very aligned with the approach our President Kaler is taking with looking at the university. So I'd like to thank you very much. I certainly have a lot of support and interest in seeing this go forward.
Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. This may fall in the category of piling on, but I'll do it anyway. 6 months, I guess 6 meetings into my term, on the opposite end of the spectrum of Regents Allen and Simmons, I also want to commend you on a thoughtful, comprehensive, incredibly well summarized, well written summary and then well presented. I haven't felt, honestly, as informed about something that we're going to approve as I do in this case. So very, very nicely done, and given the depth and breadth and scope of this, it's digestible and manageable. Thank you. So with that in mind, when we think about our 3-part mission, education, research, and outreach, we don't often talk under the education piece of that about workforce development, but one of my passions is certainly meeting the needs of the public and private sector organizations in the state. And as I see us looking at that undergrad STEM area increase, I think we're hitting it spot on in that regard and meeting the needs and expectations of the employers in the state, again, public and private sector. And I can speak pretty clearly to the latter. This is where we have to focus, and I really applaud the increase in helping with that supply. That's what the state's employers look to us to do. One question at the tail end of all that, this is obviously Twin Cities. There's some capacity in the coordinate campuses to do some STEM, graduate more students in that arena. I'm familiar with Duluth's ability to, they got new engineering facilities. Do we coordinate back with, through Vice President Jones and President Kaler with that? Can you speak to that real quickly?
Yes, Chair Cohen and Regent McMillan, that's exactly correct. While this is a Twin City-centric report, many of its recommendations we think will be helpful in conversations with our coordinate campuses, and Senior Vice President Jones is beginning those conversations, aligned with an earlier announcement by the President with regard to new investments in faculty hiring. That STEMS initiative is also going to be discussed with the coordinate campuses in their compact discussions very, very soon. So we'll join the principles and recommendations here and see how they fit or not with the mission and goals of our coordinate campuses.
Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an outstanding planning document. So congratulations to all the committee members and the President, I know, who was involved in directing it. It's going to help us with our long-term financial planning. It's going to help us eventually when we revisit the strategic plan. It's a foundational document, and especially the detail on the graduate and professional school areas, metrics and measurements. I am going to push back a little bit and ask Mr. McMaster about limiting of the honors program. On one hand, we're saying we want to limit the growth there, and on the other, we're saying we want to modestly increase some of the collegiate enrollment. And I would push to say, why not have some modest increase? That's been very successful. It's a great recruiting tool. And if we're looking at bringing in kids from a wider mix of states, if we're looking at differential pricing at some point, why are we limiting the honor school when that drives the excellence that we're all looking for?
Chair Cohen, Regent Beeson, President Kaler, we've given that a lot of thought, in fact. What we try to do is keep the honors class at 10% of the overall student body. That's the aspirational goal here. And we've been tending to be a bit above that, in fact, in the last few years, 11 or 12%. I think there are 2 critical reasons we don't want to do that. And of course, as we move forward, we can throw that into the equation and consider it. One is the prestige of the program. The more students you let into the honors program, the less attractive it comes to the really high ability students who would like to join that program. So if we nudge that up to 13%, 12 or 13%, maybe it would not have an effect. If you increase the number of honors students to 15 or 20%, then I think you're in a situation where it's not going to be as attractive to those really high ability students who we're trying to bring here, and we're trying to recruit over MIT and over Harvard and Princeton and so on. The second is the budget. the honors budget now is razor thin, and we would have to add to that budget for advising, for the curriculum, and that wouldn't be an impossibility, but at this moment, we don't have the resources. In fact, I have the director of honors who's very unhappy with me right now because we let too many science and engineering and biological science honors students in this year, and it's stressing his whole system in the curriculum, course access, and advising. So if in fact we move in that direction, we have to consider those two factors, but the budget isn't there right now.
Madam Chair, can I follow up real quick?
Sure. Yes.
On your first point, Mr. McMaster, there's no evidence to suggest that we peaked in the area of the quality of applications for in a couple of our collegiate levels. So why not let money aside for the moment? Why not let the quality of those applications drive the quantity of that program?
Chair Cohen, President Kaler, Regent Beeson. In fact, when we're doing our modeling now to look at the enrollment growth, we are starting to level off in terms of the metrics a bit. We've made tremendous progress in the last few years at increasing the number of applications in the high ability ranks, the high ACT and high school ranks, but we're starting to see that level off a bit as we expected it would. And so it's not likely we're going to have that same growth in the pool of high ability applicants moving forward.
If I, Chair Cohen and Regent Beeson, if I could also add, your point's well taken with regard to the upward curve on the quality which we're seeing, and we're very pleased with that. But we are constrained within a budget, and there are balances and optimalities that we try to have to accommodate when you're looking at the entire 33,000 student enrollment as well as our graduate program. I think there's optimism here, however, Regent Beeson, to think that when we open Northrop, which is going to be the spectacular new home for the honors program, we can relook at the question of size of the honors program, because this is going to afford us absolutely first-rate new space for our honors students, which we presently don't have. One of the driving forces for Northrop, we all recall. But it'll come back down to a balance and the optimality within the context of the budget. We're hopeful that this budget will be better going forward, but in the 3 last budget cycles, we've taken a substantial cut, as we all well know. And so we haven't been able to put as many resources into advancement of where we are in the honors program right now. But your point is very well taken. If we have that kind of quality, we need to keep driving it, and hopefully we'll be able to have the new investments to do just that, particularly as it aligns with the STEM initiative that's just been presented to you. But I think shortly when Northrop reopens, it's an opportunity to reevaluate the size.
Okay. Yes, President Kaler.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. Regent Beeson, a comment. The Honors College is also a terrific opportunity for philanthropy, and you will see that agenda advance going forward.
Good. Regent Broad.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I apologize for having to step out. I heard the presentation, and it was very thorough yesterday, too. So, and actually, I was thinking about it last night a little bit, and as I go through the presentation again, the undergraduate piece has, I think, obviously is really well set for workforce needs and for the needs of the various colleges. But it seems to me through the presentation, the graduate school piece of it actually takes it to the next step, which is the quality-centered and the quality metrics that will be used to evaluate not just how many people we have in a program, but how well that program is performing. And so I'm just wondering, and I'm guessing it might just have to do with how much information you had and what you wanted to bring forward to us, but I just wanted to make sure that the undergraduate program level is being evaluated with similar quality metrics as they are on the graduate level, because I think those metrics and actually the way they were laid out are really important pieces of not just making sure that we allow people in, but making sure that we are sending them out with the right education and the right in the right quality for the U. So I'm guessing it has more to do with the amount of time that you had available.
Chair Cohen, President Kaler, Regent Broad. We actually do have a set of metrics for looking at the quality of the undergraduate experience that we track pretty carefully. One set, of course, was presented in the accountability report, and it deals with graduation rates, retention rates, and something that we're increasingly looking at is student satisfaction coming out. So we have several survey instruments we use, the NESI, and we're moving more aggressively to use the CIRA, which is the Survey of Engagement on Research Universities, that measures all kinds of characteristics on student satisfaction, from the curriculum to the advising to financial aid. So both through the kind of metrics that we've been tracking longitudinally, as well as the surveys we do, senior exit surveys, the NESI, the CIRU, I think we're getting the kinds of data that I think you're asking about.
Just as a follow-up.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then Vice Provost McMaster, will you then be evaluating that data in a similar manner to what is being suggested in the report that the graduate schools are evaluating it? If a program is not meeting or not meeting expectations, then it is slated for removal?
Chair Cohen, Regent Broad, no, actually, we don't have any plans to dig in at that level and take these data and start to evaluate individual departments on the performance of undergraduates. We do that more at the collegiate level, where we look at the retention and the satisfaction and the graduation for the different colleges, and we pressure colleges when we see that they're not performing to our expectations. They all have aspirational metrics for retention and graduation, and so it's more accomplished at the collegiate level than going back to the individual department level at the undergraduate, for undergraduates.
President Kaler, comment.
Thank you, Chair Cohen and Regent Broad. Just a brief follow-up. A substantial fraction of our undergraduate programs are also accredited externally, and so they have a rigorous review on a periodic basis that is a quality assurance.
Regent Swigum.
I was just had a little perception here, Regent Beeson and Regent Ramirez. Is it just me, or does McMillan sound wiser and a little deeper since he joined this side of the table?
It's very interesting sitting on this side of the table. So.
We're glad to have you over here. And I agree about the boldness of the report that I heard from Regent Simmons. It's very bold. But, Provost Sullivan, it becomes bolder when we take the actions. Reports and studies, and they challenge people, but the actions become much bolder than the report itself. So my question, I guess, is kind of follow up from Regent Broad on the graduate side. Professor Vandenbosch, Professor Vandenbosch, as we develop this process for evaluations, what's our time frame of this process? When do you think that the process will come back to the president and or the board and say this program needs redesigned, these programs need to be redesigned or reevaluated or even eliminated? That's when it becomes bolder. What's our time frame for the development of the evaluation?
Chair Cohen, President Kaler, and Regent Swigum, having been a member of the committee, I think the committee would like to see this undertaken immediately, but I think I'll give that question to Provost Sullivan in terms of what he might think in terms of execution.
He's probably going to be gone by that time.
Right.
That's a lifeline. Chair Cohen and Regent Swigum. This is a multi-year process, obviously. We have well over 100 graduate programs that will be under the microscope, as Kate has suggested, if we begin this review process. This review process has begun. Henning Schroeder, our Vice Provost for Graduate Education, has already opened up the conversation with all of our deans about the quality metrics, phase 1. They've been rolled out. He's working with them and gathering more direct information on that. This really brings together phase 2 of those metrics as Kate arrayed here on the slide for you. And those will now be in full discussion with the deans, literally as we speak. All of the metrics, those qualitative centric metrics that she introduced, are now open for full discussion with our deans. And that gets rolled up on an annual process of how do we fund the recruitment of and the retention of our graduate students. Those funding decisions going forward will be directly reliant on how well our colleges and the departments are doing on these qualitative metrics that we're sharing with you today. So the process has begun, it's all now being integrated, and the conversations have begun with the deans and the department heads.
Thank you.
Multi-year.
The process is in motion.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I just don't want Provost Sullivan this to be a report that, you know, we put on the shelf, great job, we put it on the shelf and then we forget about it. And, you know, in a year or 2 or 3, I'm going to find this report again, and I wanted to see what redesign we've entered into.
2 years ago, Chair Cohen and Regent Swigum, we began the reorganization and the restructure of the graduate school. This is part and parcel of the process that was laid out at that point. I think it's been very steady and significant progress. We have a ways to go. But this is major reform at the university, and it's going to get right to where President Kaler has articulated throughout all of his speeches. This is a university that wants first-rate graduate programs, and to ensure that we have funding and investments for those programs and a process by which we can decide which ones aren't and how we can't afford them any longer. So I think we have a formal structure and process to do exactly what the President has told all of us he wants done.
Thank you.
And Regent Larson.
Provost Sullivan, I appreciate your comments and most particularly the work that you all have done on this report. And I enjoyed the committee meeting yesterday when we could get into probably more detail than we can now. But I do have a couple of comments. One is, in regards to graduate programs, it's been my experience that with large, complex organizations, creating change is usually difficult. But one thing that always works is when you start to measure, have a systematic approach to that measurement, and then get people on board with the ultimate objectives. Change starts happening more quickly than you would expect. Takes a while, but the very fact that you're going to begin to measure and then get people on board in areas where we do have opportunities for improvement, and when they start buying in, they'll tend to make the changes themselves, especially if they like the idea of continuation.
Economic incentives can play a large role.
And another comment I have in regards to the question that Regent Beeson had about the size of the honors program, I think that's a philosophical issue. To what extent do we want to truly become elitist? To become extraordinarily good, yes, but I'm not so sure that we want to have a really high percentage of our kids on honors programs. I personally would like to see a lot more 3.2s who graduated in less than 4.5 years with outstanding leadership skills. Just as much as more so than I would like to have 20 or 25% of the kids on an honors program.
Thank you, Regent Larson. That sounds as though that's a discussion for another day and an interesting discussion. Thank you very much, Vice Provost McMaster, Provost Sullivan, Professor Vanden Bosch. clearly, this report has resonated with the regents. There was a lot of discussion and very good questions, and we seem very, very interested. If you have any closing remarks.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Sounds good. We really appreciate the very hard work that all of you and the committee has done on this presentation and the work behind it. And now we will go into the reports of the committees. The Facilities Committee, Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the Facilities Committee, an action item, the committee unanimously recommends approval of the capital budget amendment to provide for the funding for the Cardiology Department Building Infrastructure Systems Upgrade, BCRC, on the second floor. I move its approval.
Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Committee members, Madam Chair, non-action items, which are two. The committee also discussed and received information on one, the current thresholds for the Board of Regents approval of real estate transactions and the recommended threshold increases. And secondly, the recent ceremonial groundbreaking for the new physics and nanotechnology facility on the Twin Cities campus. An addendum to that, we were graced with the presence of President Kaler, and he described for us some of the practical applications of nanotechnology and how we move forward in that regard. Madam Chair, that concludes my report for the Facilities Committee.
Thank you, Regent Johnson. Report of the Faculty, Staff, and Student Affairs Committee, Regent Simmons.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. The committee unanimously recommends approval of the revised consent report, which includes the appointment of Dr. Karen Hansen as Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost effective February 1st, 2012. I would share with you in this motion the committee's enthusiasm, which we indeed share with the President, but we say that with less enthusiasm about seeing Provost Sullivan leave this role. I move approval.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? We have a new provost.
The committee discussed, received reports on three very important issues, activities actually in the life of our students and supporting our students' success in educating our students. The first was with the Strengths Finder assessment that the freshman class undertakes. We're pleased to see that's going to be broadened to include transfer students, and we're looking forward to seeing what the results are for the students of participating in that activity. We also heard a report on active learning environments on the Twin Cities campus with an emphasis on the new Science Teaching and Student Services building, and a sort of, in our eyes, a companion report on another very active learning environment, and that is what is going on at the University of Minnesota, Rochester. We were enthusiastic about knowing about these ways of teaching students, and think it will also be informative to have that background as we go forward in the Education Planning and Policy Committee discussions on the role of e-learning in the education of the student body. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Simmons. Report of the Finance and Operations Committee, Regent Hung.
This month we had two action items. The first was a resolution, issuance of debt. The committee unanimously recommends approval of the financing resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of bonds in the principal amount of up to $61 million. I move its approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Carries,
Thank you.
passes.
The second item was our consent report. The committee unanimously recommends approval of the consent report, which includes the purchase of goods and services over $1 million and the approval of a new underwriter. I would like to note that during this committee, there were a lot of people who were against the use of this underwriter, but I do think that they have a point, and maybe in the future we should look into who we choose as underwriters and perhaps what their social responsibilities are, as well as using local businesses. With that being said, I move its approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Under non-action items, the committee also discussed and received information on developing a long-term financial model with core principles, assumptions, and recommendations to maximize resources, efficiency, and productivity, the pending PeopleSoft upgrade project, and a summary of the quarterly meeting of the Investment Advisory Committee held on August 30th, 2011. That concludes my report.
Okay. Thank you, Regent Hung. I will not call on Regent Beeson because there was no audit committee meeting this month. Report of the Educational Planning and Policy Committee, Regent Ramirez.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. Under action items, we already had our consent. We had a revised consent report, which includes a variety of academic program changes. Sorry, I got confused between my committee and yours, Regent Simmons, since I enjoy them both so much.
And they work closely together on both.
But the pink consent report that is in front of you now has a revision, and I move its approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Under non-action items, the committee discussed and received information on a report from the Enrollment Management Committee, which should have sounded familiar to this board, and received information on the entering class profile and enrollment data for fall 2011. It's always a spectacular report showing, again, very well-prepared freshman class here on campus. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Regent Ramirez. And Regent Hung, I'm not calling on you again because the Litigation Review Committee did not meet. Is there any old business to come before the board? Any new business? If not, may I have a motion for adjournment? Is there a second?
Second.
Good. I thought maybe nobody wanted to adjourn the meeting. The meeting is adjourned.